to do treatments that will fall apart in
Yep.
3 or 4 months, and they do. So we have to identify these skill gaps, and that's not just a matter of providing skilled people, because if the people that employ them don't know what they don't know, then they won't be employed. So I see that's where the Asset Management Committee has a role of working top down and educating and providing educational opportunities from the top. And IPWA has done that. That was released at our Asset Management Congress in June this year in Gold Coast.
Mm-hmm.
We had an ex-councillor who was absolutely brilliant, launched it, but IPWA now has elected member training.
Yep.
So I think that is fantastic, because if you can educate the councillors, that may help educate the executive, which will then empower the numerous people who've got a lot of skills in the practitioner area and asset management area. So often the skills are there and the people might be there, but they're not empowered to do what they need to do.
You got that right.
So there are some challenges.
There is. And look, listening to what you've been saying for the last 15 minutes, I didn't know any of that, which says something, because I don't have that, I don't get any of that sort of mail or anything like that of what's happening. So I go onto the internet and I look beyond Australia and all that, so you get the bigger picture. But there's something there, because I didn't even know you were having elections in the asset management. So there you go.
Well, it's interesting too, Sandy, with the international standards connections and being online for numerous meetings over the last 3 years or so. I always pictured asset management was infrastructure asset management, like public assets, roads, buildings, bridges. The chair of one of the committees I'm on works for Tetra Pak, who makes the cartons for milk bottles and everything else in Malmö, Sweden. And it's interesting, their asset management is eking out microseconds on a production line.
Absolutely.
And maintaining all those bearings and everything else that makes it go wrong, and they can't have downtime. So so that's the sort of production line type asset management. Maintenance management is probably bigger than busy infrastructure stuff that I've dealt with. So I've learned a huge amount there.
Yep.
And also one of the biggest asset group on the face of the earth is intangible assets.
Yep.
It makes up nearly 80% of the major companies in this world, your Googles and everyone else. Intangible assets. So when we're dealing with international standards, we need to be able to deal with tangible assets and intangible assets, and fully scalable. So a small organisation, huge organisation. So it's been a big learning experience about the breadth of asset management. And I had been focused on a particular area.
Well, the classic one is intellectual property. What you've learned over the years, what you put out, and all the rest of it. And
goodwill.
Goodwill and all the rest of it. Yeah, that's a big, big one.
And one of the committees I'm on relates to 55,010, which is asset management, and it's the relationship between financial and non-financial management.
Yep.
So this is the integration of finances and infrastructure, there I go again, finances and assets.
Yep.
And because we have different we have GAAP, the American accounting standard.
Yes.
We have the IFRS. We have different standards around the world.
Yes, we do.
And so we're actually producing, I end up in subcommittees producing papers which are published to try and explain the differences and how you account for intangible assets, etc., and the differences. So it's trying to bring finance and asset people together and say that their different perspectives, they may be different, and they're both relevant and both valid, but they need to work together and understand each other.
Yep, absolutely.
So the new 55,010 document will be very good on that. We've given that a fair upgrade.
It's interesting that, because what happened over time, especially like valuations, okay? When we first started doing valuations, the engineers were responsible, and you'd employ a sub consultant, if you like, a valuer. So, because the only difference is you're looking at the engineering from a replacement point of view, and the things you can't do is the land and the buildings market value. Okay, so we used to do that. Then they flipped it round so that the valuer was now in charge of valuations. The engineers was now supporting, even to the point where there are no engineers supporting. So you've got the valuers doing valuations, which is, as the name suggests, it's their industry. But unless the engineers are in touch with the finance, it's basically an interference, if you like. You've got this thing in the way in terms of valuations, and the engineers can't actually talk to finance. I mean, I do a lot of valuations, heavens above, and I get called in to help valuers with some of the wastewater stuff, to help them do the job. And so I always get involved with the auditors as well. So the understanding is there, but with others, it's not. What's produced, you wouldn't even look at it from an engineering point of view, and many people do.
Yeah.
It's just that makes sense.
In my experience, working in lots of different local governments in Victoria and around Australia, that there's all sorts of different models about where valuations are held, etc. And some have nailed it and have got that relationship happening. Others haven't. And to people like you and I, when you're looking at the books, you can see the mismatches. And one thing that's really great to see is the new legislation in Victoria requiring an asset plan to be produced, and effectively the numbers in the asset management plans need to match the long-term financial plan.
Yeah.
So that then puts the pressure, because it's a legal requirement, it puts the pressure on your CEOs to work with the council and their staff to actually make sure that their asset management processes are robust.
Yeah.
And you don't actually have to go for third-party audit on 55,001, which is the asset management system standard. But if you use that, you'll go very close to having something in place that will work for you. And that's how you put that asset management system in place. You get the results out of a plan, and they go into the asset plan and line up with the LTFP, because I've spent many, many consulting years looking at two sets of figures. The asset management plan, long-term, the capital works requirements, and then you look at the long-term financial plan in their capital, and it might as well be two different councils. So I think that's about to get better, but it's been a slow haul.
It is.
That reminds me is that the National State of the Assets report that's just about to be refreshed. IPWA has again been engaged by ALGA, the Australian Local Government Association, to run that State of the Assets report. And I'm interested to see that, and so is the committee. They've already flagged that that'll be part of one of their strategic items, that they will look at what's that trend telling us, because the last one we looked at is just a little bit of it starting to dip over as far as the asset management maturity of councils. As like, surely they haven't peaked, because I flash back to the United States, and because it's a pretty steep cliff if it starts to drop off. So to me, that's where we have to educate councillors, and that's where the elected members training comes in. And also we need to make sure that CEOs are actually held accountable for their performance, and the relationship between the long-term financial plan, the real long-term financial plan, with the asset management numbers in there, because local government has significant infrastructure assets, and it is the biggest things on their balance sheet.
Yeah,
roads, buildings, bridges.
Yeah, look, I was working with one of the councils, the regional councils or rural councils for about 5 months. And the appreciation I got there, they were doing their damnedest to align everything and all the rest of it. The amount of effort that has to go into that and the amount of understanding you have to have, it's phenomenal. But once you've got it, it becomes part of the process.
Yeah, well, that's true, Andy, Sandy, and it is critical that one of the biggest weaknesses I see in local government in the asset management field, and it probably applies in many other fields, but is they do not have that knowledge base, the organisational knowledge base. And if Joe Blow leaves or Mary Smith leaves,
gone.
They're back to square one.
Yeah.
And that is, CEOs need to be accountable for having succession planning in place. And yes, in this times of tight resources and stuff, but you have to invest in having a knowledge base that when a new person comes in, this is how it's done. This is our system. This is where 55,001, ISO 55,001 comes into. That is the asset management system. If you have that, it's all systematized.
Yep.
And it's there, and you have supporting documentation, which is required in that standard. You can just point to it. So I've seen a large unnamed large Melbourne Metropolitan Council led Victoria as the top council for 3 or 4 years. I was working with them, and I went back the following year, and they didn't know what service planning was. They didn't know anything about asset management. I went back to presentations I'd done 15 years before to start them again.
Yeah.
After a restructure.
Yeah.
So that is really scary and
well, it is, and I know where you're coming from. I mean, all you're doing is making a lifelong career for the ordinary, because you get them up the pace, they restructure, people leave, they get moved, shuffled around. There's never been any, as you say, any attempt at upskilling others or having that support so they can move through. And as a result, you're back to square one. I've dealt with councils for 20 odd years, and sadly, I've seen them go backwards.
Yeah. But that being said, I am encouraged by what I've seen in the last year or so in the limited work that I've done. The councils seem quite genuine at the executive level that we are going to do this. So that's really exciting. And I suppose I question whether I should look and see whether they are or not. I just forget about it and retire, go fishing. But yeah, look, I am encouraged, and the work that IPWA is doing and the committee is doing specifically, and a number of other people like yourself, by putting together this information, etc., to create awareness and networking opportunities is really important and encouraging for the future. So I wouldn't be taking on another couple of years as the chair if I didn't think there were some positive signs out there, Sandy. I think we need to grab them and keep running with it.
There is, and I think the councils need to be held for account. The ones who are doing it well need to be elevated and point the finger and say, look at these guys, look what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. You can come and ask us all you want, you can pay us to do it, but look at what they're doing and ask them. Don't ask me, ask them.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. No, I won't go there just at the moment.
If you want to see more of these videos, go into the Patreon site. That's patreon.com/dropofwisdom, and go to the collections folder where you will be able to see the rest of the videos.